I moved into Maplewood Estates on a crisp October morning, ready for a fresh start after selling my tech consulting firm. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first glance: tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and that quintessential suburban charm I had been craving after years in the city. My new house was a beautiful craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch, and I was looking forward to quiet evenings and peaceful weekends. What I didn't know was that my new neighbor, Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, was about to turn my peaceful retreat into a battleground. Karen introduced herself on my second day, appearing at my door with a 3-ring binder under her arm and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was in her early 50s, with perfectly highlighted hair and the kind of athleisure outfit that probably cost more than most people's work wardrobe. Before I could even invite her in, she launched into a 15-minute presentation about HOA rules, regulations, and her personal expectations for the neighborhood. I nodded politely, assuming this was just standard welcome wagon procedure with a Type A personality twist. The binder, I would learn, was her Bible. Every rule, every regulation, every approved paint color and acceptable mailbox style was documented in excruciating detail. As she flipped through the pages, I noticed tabs, highlighted sections, and handwritten notes in the margins. This wasn't just thoroughness, this was obsession. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. Your support helps me bring you more wild HOA tales and stories of epic revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to the story. The first incident happened 3 days later. I was unloading groceries when Karen appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, holding what looked like a tape measure. Karen cleared her throat loudly. "I need to discuss your vehicle situation," she announced. I looked at my car, a perfectly normal sedan parked in my own driveway, then back at her, confused. She proceeded to inform me that my car was parked 3 inches too far forward, causing the front bumper to extend slightly beyond an invisible line that, according to HOA regulations, defined the acceptable parking zone. 3 inches. She had measured. I apologized and moved the car, thinking that would be the end of it. I was so very wrong. Over the next few weeks, Karen found violations everywhere. My porch light was apparently 2 lumens brighter than regulation allowed. The wreath on my front door was hung 4 days before the acceptable seasonal decoration window. My lawn was mowed in a diagonal pattern instead of the required horizontal stripes. Each violation came with a printed notice, delivered personally by Karen, who seemed to take genuine pleasure in catching these infractions. I tried the diplomatic approach first. I invited her over for coffee, hoping to smooth things over and maybe understand what was driving this behavior. She accepted, but spent the entire visit criticizing my choice of coffee beans, the brand of milk in my refrigerator, and the fact that my kitchen curtains were a shade of blue that, while not technically violating any written rule, clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic she was trying to maintain. Then came the incident with the stray cat. A scruffy orange tabby had been wandering the neighborhood for months, and several residents, including myself, had taken to leaving out food and water. The cat was friendly but skittish, clearly someone's pet that had been abandoned or lost. I had been working on gaining its trust, hoping to eventually catch it and take it to a vet to check for a microchip. Karen hated that cat with an intensity that seemed almost irrational. She claimed it was digging in her garden, knocking over her trash cans, and generally destroying the neighborhood's carefully maintained image. She sent multiple emails to the entire HOA demanding something be done about the feral menace. When animal control explained that the cat wasn't bothering anyone and that feeding strays wasn't illegal, Karen became even more fixated. I started noticing her watching from her window whenever I put food out for the cat. She would stand there, arms crossed, glaring as the little orange tabby ate. It was unsettling, but I tried to ignore it. The cat needed help, and I wasn't going to let Karen's bizarre vendetta stop me from doing the right thing. One evening in late November, I was coming home from a business dinner when I saw something that made my blood run cold. Karen was in her side yard, partially hidden by her meticulously trimmed hedges, kneeling next to a small bowl. The orange cat was approaching cautiously, attracted by what appeared to be some kind of wet cat food. But something about the scene felt wrong. Karen kept glancing around nervously, and the way she was positioned, crouched and furtive, set off alarm bells in my head. I quietly pulled out my phone and started recording. I had installed high-end security cameras around my property after the harassment started, part of my general philosophy of documenting everything, but this felt like something that needed immediate attention. Through my phone zoom, I watched as Karen stepped back, waiting for the cat to eat. The cat sniffed the food, then, thank God, seemed to sense something was wrong and backed away. Karen's face twisted in frustration. She muttered to herself, clearly audible on my recording. "Come on, just eat it, you stupid animal. Just eat the food." The way she said it, the venom in her voice, confirmed what I had suspected. This wasn't just food. I felt sick. The cat wandered away, and Karen, looking furious, picked up the bowl and dumped it into a plastic bag, which she then shoved into her garbage can. I kept recording, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. This woman, this HOA president who obsessed over paint colors and parking spaces, had just tried to poison a defenseless animal. What kind of person does that? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, watching the video over and over, trying to decide what to do. I could confront her directly, but that would just give her a chance to deny everything or dispose of evidence. I could call the police, but would they take it seriously? I needed to be smart about this, methodical. Fortunately, being smart and methodical was exactly what I did for a living. The next morning, I called a friend from my previous life in the city, Detective Marcus Reed. We had worked together on a cybersecurity project years ago, and he owed me a favor after I had helped his department track down a hacker targeting their systems. I explained the situation and sent him the video. Marcus watched it silently, then let out a low whistle. "That's pretty clear intent," he said. "But we need that bowl, or whatever's left in her trash. Can you get it?" This is where my particular skill set became useful. I had spent 20 years in corporate security and digital forensics, which meant I knew how to gather evidence and document chains of custody. I also knew exactly how to do this legally. Trash placed at the curb for collection is considered abandoned property and can be legally searched. Karen's trash day was Wednesday. I just had to wait. Wednesday morning came, and I watched from my window as Karen wheeled her garbage can to the curb. The moment she went back inside, I was out there, wearing gloves and carrying evidence bags I had ordered online. I found the plastic bag from that night, still containing the bowl with remnants of the contaminated food. I documented everything with photos, sealed it properly, and called Marcus. The police took it from there. The lab analysis came back 3 days later, antifreeze, mixed generously into the cat food. Ethylene glycol, the technical name, is sweet-tasting to animals and absolutely lethal. Even a small amount can cause kidney failure. Karen had mixed in enough to kill multiple cats. The report made me physically ill. Marcus called me personally with the update. "We're bringing her in for questioning this afternoon. With your video, the physical evidence, and the lab results, this is a solid case for attempted animal cruelty. That's a misdemeanor in this state, but given the premeditation and the method, the DA is taking it seriously." I watched from my porch as 2 police cars pulled up to Karen's house that afternoon. The look on her face when she opened the door and saw the officers was something I will never forget. Confusion, then indignation, then slowly dawning horror as they explained why they were there. She actually tried to argue with them, standing in her doorway, gesturing emphatically. I could imagine what she was saying, "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. There must be some mistake." But there was no mistake. They arrested her right there, in full view of the neighborhood. Handcuffs and everything. Several neighbors came out to watch, whispering to each other. Karen's perfectly maintained facade crumbled as she was led to the police car, her face red with humiliation and rage. As they drove away, she looked directly at my house, and even from that distance, I could see the hatred in her eyes. The arrest was just the beginning. News spread through Maplewood Estates like wildfire. By evening, the neighborhood Facebook group was exploding with comments. Some people were shocked, others admitted they had always thought Karen was unhinged, and a few tried to defend her, suggesting it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too clear. There's no misunderstanding antifreeze in cat food. Karen made bail the next day and returned home to find her position as HOA president in jeopardy. An emergency meeting was called. I attended, sitting quietly in the back while neighbors debated what to do. Some argued she deserved due process and shouldn't be removed before trial. Others, including several people who had been on the receiving end of her petty tyranny over the years, pushed for immediate removal. The vote was close, but ultimately, Karen was suspended from her position pending the outcome of the criminal case. She blamed me, of course. Word got around that I was the one who had provided the evidence, and Karen launched a campaign of retaliation that would have been impressive if it wasn't so pathetic. She filed formal HOA complaints about my property almost daily, nitpicking every possible violation she could imagine. My mailbox was slightly faded. My lawn had 3 dandelions. My car was parked in my driveway, which was apparently creating an oil stain, even though my car didn't leak oil. Each complaint was more ridiculous than the last. But here's where Karen made her fatal miscalculation. She was so focused on harassing me through official HOA channels that she didn't realize what I was doing behind the scenes. See, when I sold my consulting firm, I didn't just walk away with a nice retirement fund. I walked away with serious wealth and connections throughout the business and legal world. And I had been researching, planning, and preparing for something Karen never saw coming. During one of her complaint frenzies, Karen made a specific demand that would become her undoing. She insisted that the HOA needed to implement stricter rules about property modifications and that any homeowner who wanted to make changes, even minor ones, needed to submit detailed plans for approval at least 90 days in advance. She wanted this rule applied retroactively to any work done in the past year, and she specifically targeted several of my recent improvements, including a small vegetable garden I had planted in my backyard. The garden was completely within regulations, visible to no one but me, and had been properly documented with the HOA before I planted it. But Karen didn't care. She filed a formal complaint claiming that I had altered the grading of my yard, that the garden beds were an unapproved structure, and that the whole thing needed to be removed and the land restored to its original condition. She cited obscure clauses about landscape modifications and property alterations, twisting the language to support her position. The interim HOA board, exhausted from Karen's constant drama, actually sided with her. I received a formal letter demanding I remove the garden within 30 days or face fines of $100 per day. It was absurd, petty, and exactly the ammunition I needed. You see, while Karen was busy measuring parking spaces and counting lumens, I had been studying every single document related to Maplewood Estates. The original development plans, the HOA founding documents, the deed restrictions, all of it. And I had discovered something interesting. A significant portion of the common areas in our neighborhood, including the main entrance, the community park, and the walking trails, were built on land that was actually still owned by the original development company. The HOA had been given permission to maintain these areas, but the actual property title had never been transferred. The development company had gone through several ownership changes over the years and had eventually been absorbed into a larger corporate entity that had subsequently gone bankrupt. The assets, including the land under our common areas, had been tied up in bankruptcy proceedings for years. No one had paid attention because the HOA just kept maintaining everything as they always had, and the bankruptcy trustee had bigger concerns than a small suburban development. No one had paid attention until I made some calls. The bankruptcy case was still technically open, and the trustee was motivated to liquidate remaining assets. So I bought the land. All of it. Every square foot of common area in Maplewood Estates was now legally mine. This cost me a significant amount of money, but after selling my firm, I could afford it. More importantly, I could afford the very expensive real estate attorneys I hired to ensure everything was completely legal and properly documented. The purchase went through quietly, with all the paperwork filed correctly with the county. I now owned the entrance to the neighborhood, the park where families gathered, and the trails where people walked their dogs. But I wasn't done. I hired a surveying company, one of the best in the state, to do a comprehensive survey of the entire neighborhood. I wanted exact property lines, easements, and right-of-way documentation. This is where things got very interesting. The survey revealed that Karen's property, through a quirk of how the original lots were laid out, had an easement running across one corner that technically belonged to the parcel I had just purchased. This easement included access rights, meaning that I, as the new owner of that parcel, had legal authority over how that section of land was used. But more importantly, the survey showed that Karen's beloved garden shed, the one she had spent thousands of dollars on and where she stored all her HOA enforcement materials, was partially built on this easement. About 18 inches of the structure extended onto property where I now controlled the access rights. I had my attorneys draft a very thorough, very legal letter. It was delivered to Karen on a Tuesday morning by a process server. I watched from my window as she signed for it, confused about why she was receiving legal documents. I imagined her opening it, reading the first page, then flipping frantically through the rest of the packet. The letter informed her of three things. First, that I was now the legal owner of the Maplewood Estates common areas. Second, that her garden shed was partially constructed on an easement attached to my property. Third, that according to the very HOA rules she had championed and specifically the retroactive property modification clause she had pushed through, she was in violation and had 30 days to remove the structure and restore the land to its original condition. But that wasn't even the best part. The letter also informed her that as the new owner of the common areas, I was exercising my property rights to revoke the HOA's blanket permission to maintain those spaces. The HOA would now need to submit formal requests for any maintenance activities, which I would evaluate on a case-by-case basis. Additionally, I was implementing reasonable rules for use of the common areas, including the requirement that any individual with pending criminal charges related to animal cruelty was prohibited from accessing the park or trails. Karen couldn't use the neighborhood entrance without my permission. She couldn't walk in the park. She couldn't access the trails. And she had to tear down her precious shed. The legal fees for her to fight this would be astronomical, and she would lose because everything I had done was completely legal. I had used her own weapon, the HOA rules and regulations she worshipped, against her. The retroactive modification clause she had pushed through to target my garden now applied to her shed. The obsessive documentation and rule enforcement she had championed now trapped her. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she called 3 different attorneys. All of them told her the same thing: she didn't have a case. The property purchase was legitimate, the easement was clearly documented, and the HOA rules she had insisted on applied equally to her. She could comply, or she could face the same escalating fines she had been so eager to impose on others. The criminal case was still pending, which meant the park ban would be in effect for months at minimum. If she was convicted, and given the evidence, that was likely, I could extend the ban indefinitely based on community safety concerns. She would be living in a neighborhood where she couldn't access half the amenities. 2 days after receiving my letter, Karen appeared at my door. She looked like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her face pale. She tried to start with anger, demanding to know what I thought I was doing, threatening to sue, throwing around phrases like harassment and retaliation. But I just stood there, calm and quiet, until she ran out of steam. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, I spoke softly but clearly. "Karen, you tried to poison an innocent animal. You harassed me and countless others over the most petty violations imaginable. You weaponized the HOA rules to make people's lives miserable because it made you feel powerful. I'm simply using those same rules, the ones you insisted were so important, and applying them fairly and equally. You taught me that rules matter. So let's follow them." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, searching for some argument, some loophole, some way out. But there wasn't one. I had been thorough, patient, and completely legal. Everything I had done was by the book, her book, the one she had been hitting people with for years. The final blow came the following week. The HOA held another emergency meeting to discuss the common area situation. I attended and brought my attorneys. Several board members tried to negotiate, asking if there was some arrangement we could reach. I agreed, but only under specific conditions. Karen would be permanently removed from any HOA leadership position, the retroactive modification rule would be repealed, and the HOA would establish a formal review process to prevent future abuse of power. They agreed to everything. They didn't have a choice. Karen sat in the back of the room, watching her empire crumble. She had spent years building her little kingdom of petty tyranny, and now it was gone. The rules she had crafted to control others had destroyed her instead. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, Karen remained seated, staring at nothing. I walked past her on my way out, and our eyes met for just a moment. In that instant, I saw complete comprehension dawn on her face. She understood, fully and finally, that she had been outmaneuvered at every turn. That her own obsession with rules and power had been turned into the weapon that defeated her. That the person she had tried to crush with petty complaints and poisoned cat food had taken everything she cared about and done it completely legally. Her face went from pale to ashen, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white, and I watched as the full scope of her situation crystallized in her mind: the criminal charges, the legal fees to fight my property claims she couldn't win, the shed she would have to demolish, the common areas she could no longer access, the HOA position she had lost, the neighbors who now knew exactly what kind of person she was, and the undeniable reality that I had used her own rulebook to systematically dismantle everything she had built. The shocked expression that spread across Karen's face was one of complete and utter defeat, the moment when someone realizes they haven't just lost a battle but have been strategically checkmated, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing, she could do about any of it. If you enjoyed watching Karen get exactly what she deserved, smash that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more stories of entitled people getting their comeuppance. Drop a comment and let me know what you would have done in this situation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.